and walk a certain number of paces. Turn to face the opponent and shoot. Typically, the graver the insult, the fewer the paces agreed upon. And it's big in A Hero of Our Time, because Grushnitsky, the doctor said that Grushnitsky's second was very intent on 6 paces, very few paces. So he was like pretty darn insulted. However, if you were a more face-to-face fellow, other ways of dueling exist. Take Grushnitsky and Pechorin. They did the alternative style like many duelists prefer. At any given signal, often the dropping of a handkerchief, so like hit the ground. The principals could advance and fire at will. This wasn't what Grushnitsky and Pechorin did, but this system reduced the possibility of cheating, as neither of the shooters or the principals had to trust the other man not to turn too soon and kill him. Another system involved alternative shots being taken, which is what they did in the book, beginning with the challenged firing first. This is what we see with our friends in The Hero of Our Time, or the challenger firing first. Dueling was common against Russian writers, poets, and politicians. Alexander Pushkin, whom Lermontov was pretty much in love with, fought 29 duels before being killed in a duel with some French guy. Lermontov was killed 4 years later by a fellow army officer, just like his idol. It's kind of touching. That's the same way, I think. Okay, do we have time? I think we do. If I'm going to do this fast. This is the Burr-Alexander Hamilton duel, and Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr were two. Okay, I'll just read it because it says it better. Amongst the most famous duels in this great country of ours, America, was the duel between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. These two dudes had some beef with each other for as long as they were in politics. They were the leaders of the 2 main political parties in the United States at the time, and they hated each other's guts. So that set the stage for the ultimate duel between the 2 of the most famous politicians of the time. And this is a very famous picture. They actually didn't have painting or pictures of it. It's really interesting. I'll get into it in a second. But no one saw the duel. But that is what they believe it looked like. So it started out on the coastal cliff, on a coastal cliff, very secret, on the New Jersey side of the Hudson. You don't have to take notes, but this is. And so what they did is they had it basically on the Hudson so that the confusion would arise as to whether it should be persecuted or prosecuted in New Jersey or New York. And so that kind of in the end, let all parties off free and go. They made sure that there were several cases of plausible deniability. Like the pistols were made in carrying cases. When they rowed over, the rowers said, I saw no guns because they were in cases. Everyone was all the seconds and all the servants and all the rowers turned their back to the duel so they could say legally in court under oath that I saw no fire. And Hamilton was actually challenged by Aaron Burr. And so on the day, Hamilton fired into the air, which was against the custom of firing into the ground. So critics have said that maybe Aaron Burr was like, oh, he missed, but he was shooting for me. And so then he either accidentally or purposefully shot and killed Hamilton. But I just really skipped over it, but it was really cool seeing how they made it so that everyone could say nothing happened. But those are a little of the best duels in history.
Okay. So now dueling back in Russia. So it was brought to Russia in the 17th century by European adventurers who were in Russian service. And it became popular very rapidly as it was a relatively quick and efficient way to resolve disputes that we've seen. But one of the bad effects of it was in the military, it was happening frequently, and casualties among high-ranking officials was alarmingly high. So dueling was getting out of hand and casualties were increasing at an alarming rate, so Emperor Peter I was forced to forbid the practice on pain of having both duelists hanged. But even despite this official ban, dueling still became a significant military tradition in the Russian Empire, and it didn't stop. Okay, so the Russian dueling code, as Connor touched on and Michael's going to touch on later, the name he couldn't think of was Vladimir Durasov, and it was printed in 1908, and as Connor said, it forbade people of different ranks to take up and duel. So dueling was also common against prominent Russian writers, poets, and politicians, as we've seen Pushkin fought in 29 duels and was eventually killed by George Xanthus. And Lermontov's duel, which Michael will expand upon, was also very prominent as it mirrored Pushkin's. The dueling tradition did, however, die out in the Russian Empire slowly from the mid-19th century. And here's just a picture. This is of Pushkin's duel. There you go.
Alright, Mikhail Lermontov, duel magnate, and he was in a lot of duels in his life, and I'm going to compare his duels to the duel in A Hero of Our Time. And he was exiled the first time in 1837, and when Russian poet Alexander Pushkin was killed in a duel, Lermontov wrote the poem "The Death of a Poet," and the final lines of this poem explicitly accuse the Russian, like the highest pillars of Russian society, of involvement in Pushkin's murder. And the poem caused uproar, and Lermontov gained fame, but the Tsar caught word of this, and so he had to deal with the wrath of the Tsar, and he was arrested and sent to the Caucasus on exile. Soon after that, though, he returned back to St. Petersburg, and after writing A Hero of Our Time, he clashed with a French ambassador's son over a young woman, and a duel followed, which resulted in Lermontov's second exile into the Caucasus. And he was eventually allowed back on a 2-month leave from the Caucasus, but was forced by Tsar Nicholas I to return to the army in Pyatigorsk, which is a small town, as we learned, in May of 1841. Alright, so we get to his death, and while he's in Pyatigorsk, he met one of his old family acquaintances, which was a fellow army officer, Nikolai Martynov. And although they were on good terms, Martynov soon became the target of Lermontov's sharp wit and cruel jokes. The jokes about Martynov's affectations of Caucasian dress and manners made Martynov snap, and so he challenged Lermontov to a duel. Martynov was left unharmed, but Lermontov was killed by his comrade's first shot in July 1841. He was 26 years old. And so now in A Hero of Our Time, Lermontov's duel is strangely similar to Pechorin's, or his duels really, are very similar to Pechorin's duel with Krasnitsky. Just like how Lermontov and Martynov seemed to be on good terms, on the outside it was the same for Pechorin and Krasnitsky, who never really had a problem at the beginning. And Pechorin almost looks forward to a possible duel when he says on page 73, "I fancy one day our paths will cross and one of us will come off worst." And just as Lermontov's jokes made Martynov snap, so too did Pechorin's fun-making of Krasnitsky. And the one that sent Krasnitsky over the edge, was after he received his new fancy uniform. He was very excited to look dashing for Princess Mary, but after Mary asked if Pechorin thought Krasnitsky looked better in his previous gray coat, Pechorin responded with, "No, I don't agree. His uniform makes him look more boyish than ever." And this made Krasnitsky snap because he thought he looked like a man and he wanted to look like a man in front of Mary and everything to impress her. And this was too much for Krasnitsky, who stomped off furious. After the ball, Pechorin discovered that Krasnitsky and the Dragoon captain had begun to team up on him and began to form the plan for the duel. Lermontov's fictional duel in the story seems to be like a combination of his duel with the French ambassador's son and also his duel later after the book that he died in. It's like the French ambassador's son duel because it was over a young woman, just like Pechorin and Krasnitsky seemed to be over Mary. And it was a lot like the one with Martynov because it was brought on by jokes and how he just targeted him for everything, just like Pechorin did with Krasnitsky. The French ambassador's son's side comes in when someone says at the meeting that Pechorin eavesdrops on. Krasnitsky's got it in for him because he cut him out with the princess. So we see that Krasnitsky kind of wants to duel him because he cut him out, like he got him out of Mary's like thoughts, basically. And what started out as only a scare to teach Pechorin a lesson quickly turned to one of revenge after Grushnitsky accused Pechorin of leaving from the princess's room that night. And Grushnitsky planned on loading only his pistol, but not Pechorin's, so he could have an unfair advantage and kill Pechorin. Grushnitsky in the duel, which was on a cliff at dawn, as Connor and Zane both said was normally the case. He wounded Pechorin in the knee, but did not kill him because he felt ashamed to kill an unarmed man. This is similar to Lermontov's final duel, in which he shot and missed Martinov, not wanting to kill a comrade. Pechorin asked Werner, who was his second, to load his gun since it was left empty, since he knew the plan that they were going to have. And Pechorin shot and killed Grushnitsky on the cliff in one shot. This is the exact same with Martinov shooting and killing Lermontov on a cliff in one shot. And some final comparisons. Both duels took place on cliffs in the Caucasus region. Both first shooters, Lermontov and Grushnitsky, missed their shots, and they were not rewarded, but instead killed by their enemies, Martinov and Pechorin, on the first shot. So some discussion questions. As seen in both Lermontov's life and A Hero of Our Time, why do you think dueling was such an important factor in settling quarrels in Russia?
Because it was like quick and it was kind of like secret, like it didn't have to be like a big thing. Like you're going the doors in like 2 seconds. So kind of got it over.
Do you think the duel between Pechorin and Grushnitsky was more similar to Lermontov's duel with the French ambassador's son, or with Martinov? I mean, it's kind of with both, because one's over a woman, just like Princess Mary, and the other one is over jokes.
Well, and it's so wild that that second duel was so similar because The Hero of Our Times was written before, but I kind of have this feeling that maybe Lermontov thought that it would end up in his favor, so maybe he joked. I don't know, maybe it was set up similarly to The Hero of Our Time. Am I making sense?
Makes sense. Like maybe he was like, what if like I did the exact same thing as my
That,
book?
as Pechorin did, yeah,
That'd be cool.
just to mess with people.
Like,
Hey, I'm
I
gonna
don't
die.
expect him to
Yeah.
die.
Or maybe he started out writing the duel in A Hero of Our Time based off of his first duel with the French ambassador.
Russians are messed
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's over a woman.
There's some weird people.
Why did Pechorin seem so certain that Grushnitsky would not kill him on a shot? Because in the story, I mean, he just seemed so confident.
Well, he didn't necessarily totally, because he was like, what if like I did get shot? He's like ready to run forward like the second he's got this. And he was like, what if I do that? Maybe I'll die, you know. But like at the same time, he kind of knew that he wasn't going to be loaded, and then he kind of had an insight to Grushnitsky's mind, and he's like, he wouldn't do it. I don't think he would. He wouldn't do it.
Yeah. I just think that he thought Grushnitsky was weak through the whole thing, and I think he knew, as I think the readers, I didn't think he would actually shoot him, because he was weak, and Pechorin was so in his head, you know. Yeah, because, well, the Dragoon captain wanted him to kill Pechorin.
Maybe he was also kind of determined because when he was eavesdropping on their conversation that night, they said that he was a coward and Grushnitsky wasn't. He kind of like thought the opposite almost. Alright, the last one. During the duel, Pechorin shows signs of both courage and cowardice. In what ways is he brave and where is he cowardly during the duel?
I think it's interesting how he, in a sense, plays Grushnitsky, kind of like, I think in the Burr-Hamilton duel Connor was talking about, how Grushnitsky, in a sense, showed him mercy because he was unarmed, and then he came back and killed him. I think, I don't know, I guess that's, in a sense, courageous, and like he's too proud, I